Hello, hello to everyone here. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm Megan Mesher-Cox. I think I know a good number of you. Thanks for joining us for our Lunch and Learn, our seminar, so webinar rather. So today Jay's going to lead us through a great talk about your brain, Nourish and Protect. So those of you that don't know Jay Ziebart yet, she's going to tell us her story. So I'll give her more time to be able to do that. But thanks for joining us today. And please, throughout the webinar, it'll be about a 40-minute talk. The last 20 minutes will be for questions and answers. So please, throughout the webinar, fill in or send us a chat or the questions and answer button. Send in your questions that way, and then we'll be able to hopefully get to all of them at the end. So Jay, I'll kick the ball over to you.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Megan Mesher-Cox. I am going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. We're going to get to know each other just a little bit better in a moment. So those of you who are on a little bit early should have seen this image. Your genes do not dictate your destiny. We're going to be talking a lot about that today. All right, so your brain, nourish and protect. So my wheelhouse is really nutrition. That's what I do. I help people with their nutrition goals, their health goals with respect to their nutrition. But health is a holistic picture, right? There's a lot of aspects of health that we need to address, especially when it comes to our brains. So the bulk of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be nutrition. But right off, we're actually going to talk about some of the other things as well that are also important to protect your brain. Let me start off by just sharing my story really quickly. I'm going to give you the short version. So almost 9 years ago now, I went to my doctor and got the scariest diagnosis I've ever experienced. Fortunately, I've only had one really scary diagnosis. And my doctor told me that I had stroke level blood pressure. I was 35 years old. And I had people in my life that had massive strokes, and so I knew the devastation that could cause. And so, you know, I love science, and I love learning, and I love experiencing everything this world has to offer. So when my brain was in jeopardy, I took it very seriously. And what I did was I threw out everything else that I had learned, because what it had gotten me was my highest weight ever with stroke level blood pressure, not to mention a host of other issues. And so what I did was I got into the science up to my elbows. I just disregarded everything else, because there's a lot of noise and opinions out there about nutrition, and most of them are not based on science. It's actually kind of terrifying. So it's really important to be your own best advocate. So I'm going to show you some before and during pictures, not because I want you to see how fantastic I look now, but because I want you to have a look at this woman's face here. Of course, that's me. Have a look. This woman here is, you see the gray pallor with the bright red hot on top, very inflamed, painful, uncomfortable, foggy-brained, exhausted. That is who I was. And I thought I was doing everything right. That is the scariest bit. But again, most nutrition recommendations are not based on the hard science. And so after I decided to take control of my own health, this is my during, because there is no after. This is a lifelong process. We continue to experience life. We continue to learn. We continue to move forward. We continue to improve our health. But you'll notice that it's not just about the fact that the horrible inflammation and the pain and the brain fogginess and all of that disappeared, not to mention approximately half person. It's also about that smile. Look at the difference. I'm going to go back one. This smile, although she's smiling as brightly as she can, is a painful smile. You can see the pain in it. And look at this one. This is a joy-filled, peaceful smile. And, you know, when people think about improving their health, they think, oh, it's hard. I'm not going to have any fun. You're going to take away all the things I enjoy. But this woman here is joyful. And I have to tell you, when you do it right, it is a beautiful, pleasure-filled, joyful, peaceful experience. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics here. So dementia is not an inevitable part of aging. Let me repeat that. Dementia is not an inevitable part of aging. Neither are heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes. Why did I include all those others? Because they are all connected. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. All of these things are related to the choices that we make as far as what we put in our body and what we do with our bodies. It's called lifestyle. So when it comes to dementia, or just brain health in general, what we do is huge. You know, people think, oh, well, you know, I have genes that, you know, I have the Alzheimer gene, let's say, for example. I'm telling you right now that I have 2 people in my life suffering with dementia, one with full-blown Alzheimer's, suffering terribly. And the worst part is that Alzheimer's has no cure. And the drugs that are out there are really not very effective. And so the good news is, even if you have somebody in your life or you're in the beginning stages of dementia, there are things you can do to improve your quality of life. You can't reverse out of it, not yet. We'll figure that out hopefully eventually, but there are things you can do to improve your quality of life. What we're talking about today are preventative measures, really, really important, especially if you do have family members that have suffered with dementia. So nutrition is huge. We're going to talk about that today. Supplements. Now, it's not just about what you take, but it's about what you don't take. And that's what I'm really going to emphasize, as well as one supplement that I recommend across the board. Of course, stay away from things that are super harmful, things that you know are harming your brain. Stay away from those. Making sure to exercise every day. That's a huge piece of brain health. People don't realize how much that impacts your brain, and not to mention the rest of your body. Now, here's the big one. Are you ready? Mental exercise. And I'm not just talking about games on your phone. I am talking about learning something new. And the more difficult it is to learn, the better. You know, 2 of my favorite recommendations for things to learn to keep that brain nice and perky and functioning well are learning a new language or learning a musical instrument, because that's kind of like learning a new language too. So continue to learn for the rest of your days. That will keep your mind alert and keep you moving forward, right? We don't want to stagnate. We want to keep moving. We want to keep improving, keep getting better and better as we age. It's not downhill the way that most people say. You can get better as you get older. And it's never too late. I have one of my new clients is in his 90s, and just fantastic. It's never too late. When is the best time to start looking after your health? Yesterday. When's the second best time? Right now. All right, so sleep, also huge, huge, huge. While we sleep, you know, our thoughts get organized and our brain detoxifies itself. So it's really, really important to get a good 7 to 9 hours on average per night. The other thing is maintaining strong social networks. Now, this has been a real struggle this past year and a half, right? Staying connected and having meaningful connections. Thankfully here locally, we are starting to open up, and hopefully we'll be open up fully soon. And so we're going to be able to meet in person again, but stay connected with those people that support you, that keep you lifted up. Okay, let's get right into it. Supplements. Now, supplements are not regulated, and they are basically medicine. So what are they? They're unregulated medicines. So we have to be very, very careful about supplements. Anybody can create a supplement, and no one is keeping track of whether they have in them what they say they do. And so common things when, you know, random tests have been done by, you know, sort of outside organizations, what they have found is sometimes they don't have even the main thing that they say that they do. They tend to have things in them that we don't want. And, you know, so we really need to be very cautious about how we choose our supplements. We want supplements that are what we need. So we need to figure out what we need first. So if you think that you need something, let's say iron, for example, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, you shouldn't be taking iron unless you've been told that you need it. So go get tested, check to make sure that you actually need it, because iron is toxic in excess amounts, especially in its supplement form. Now, if you're consuming your iron via plant-based sources, then your body will self-regulate. But those supplements are straight iron or very concentrated forms, and our bodies don't know how to regulate that. Now, Alzheimer's is a really emerging science, and we don't have a cure. We don't understand it fully. But some of the things we do understand are that heavy metals are a factor. And so you got to watch out for those excess metals that happen to be in our supplements. Another thing is that I don't recommend that you take any supplements apart from one, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, and a couple others maybe. So I'm going to talk about that. So the science is very clear that multivitamins don't do what they proclaim to do. They don't fill in the blanks like we hope. As a matter of fact, they can even throw things off because they tend to have too much of this and not enough of that. And it's just, what we want to do is we want to get a little bit laser focused with those supplements. So figure out if you need it. And then if you do, find a company that has a third party that tests their supplements for potency and safety. And the easiest way to do that is to look on their website. And if it doesn't say, give them a call or an email and find out. Because that's a really critical piece. If they have somebody else checking that's not associated with that company, you're more likely to get what you're paying for. So the one supplement that I highly recommend that everyone take is B12. Now you can get it checked. Highly recommend that you do that anyways, because some people have a little trouble absorbing certain kinds of B12. Why? Why on a plant-based diet do you need to take B12? It's because B12 comes from bacteria, and where we would normally have gotten it would be on the dirt left on the carrot as we pulled that out of the ground. But our soil is very compromised and very depleted. The other place we might get it would be streams. But I don't know about you, it's been a long time since I drank from a stream. Our water is very, very treated, necessarily so, to kill off bacteria. And so B12 is something that we need. Now, if you're eating animals, you might be getting some B12, but the B12 is so low that even animals are getting supplemented, which means you're taking a supplement either way. So just get in that B12. A lack of B12 causes neurological damage. And so this is very, very serious and very easy to correct. The preferred form is cyanocobalamin. The one that you'll see most often in the stores is methylcobalamin. Both are fine, but cyano is the preferred method. Make sure there's no other junk in your supplement. You want something that's sublingual, that goes under the tongue, either a tab that dissolves or squirt or spray. Either one of those, any one of those will work. But do make sure to have it checked regularly to make sure you're absorbing correctly, and you can adjust your supplement dosage based on that information, right? We find out the information and then we can make the decisions with it. Sometimes there are, kind of a smaller subset of people that don't absorb the cyanocobalamin as well, and they might need to take methylcobalamin. So just go ahead and check, make sure that you are getting what you need, have your blood tested, and make sure that your B12 levels are good, because it's easy to fix and really bad if it's low. The other one that I recommend that you get mostly through food are your omega-3 fatty acids. Things like flax, chia, and hemp are my favorite sources. Flax is my #1 favorite because it has other benefits too. Omega-3s are in other things as well, but we want a good balance between omega-3 and omega-6. There's a lovely ratio that needs to take place there, or that is ideal for good health. And in the standard American diet, the SAD is very sad. We tend to be very high in omega-6. So if you're consuming oils, if you're consuming animals, those omega-6 numbers can get pretty high on you. So you want to reduce your omega-6 and increase your omega-3 wherever possible. What we recommend is consuming flax, chia, or hemp daily, a tablespoon or 2. You make sure that flax and that chia is ground, because our bodies can't digest it. The other one I widely recommend, that's not really a supplement, but you can buy it in a little pill or capsule or tablet, is turmeric. Now, a couple things about turmeric. Turmeric is just a spice. It's just a little root that we turn into a spice. The root is great. The spice is great. Either way is perfectly fine. If you do buy it as a supplement, just make sure there's nothing else in it, and make sure to take it with a little bit of pepper. This increases its potency by about 1,000%. So if you're not taking it with a little pinch of pepper, you're missing out big time. So make sure that you're getting about a quarter teaspoon a day with a little pinch of pepper. One more thing about the supplements. So, I'm talking about nutrients here in this slide, but there are supplements that you can take because basically there are 3 omega-3 fatty acids that we want to think about: ALA, EPA, and DHA. And flax and chia and hemp are good sources of ALA, and our body can convert to the others. But if you have a history of any kind of disorder that's related to cardiovascular or your brain, you might want to consider a DHA EPA supplement. And the one I recommend is algae-based. And so talk to your doctor about that and see if that, or your nutritionist, and see if that's something that they would recommend for you. So if you want to find your omega-3 fatty acids in their natural forms, highly recommend, not everyone is into sea vegetables, so it's not necessary, but you can get it there. Flaxseed is my favorite source from underground. Chia seed, beans, and leafy greens, especially lentils. Lentils are a really fun one that has a beautiful ratio of omega-3 fatty acids. So getting in those foods that we already know are so fantastic for us. A special nutrient that I like to call out is lutein. And again, this is about your green leafy vegetables. Get those green leafies in every day, 2 to 3 servings minimum. That does all sorts of things. Leafy greens are calorie for calorie, the most nutrient dense and beneficial food you can consume. All right. So let's talk a little bit about foods to get in every day. Now, this is related to brain health, but also everything else. This is one unit here. It's all connected, and we separate it all out. But this is, one unit, and it all works together. Fortunately, it doesn't matter what is, going on with your body, that sort of thing, your underlying conditions. In general, a healthy diet is a healthy diet is a healthy diet, with some small tweaks depending on certain situations. But these are the things we recommend you get in on a daily. Greens, dark leafy, sprouts, herbs, those all count. You get a gold star if they're also cruciferous. What does that mean? They're kind of like the cabbage family. So the kales, the arugulas, the cabbages, of course, Brussels sprouts, all that kind of stuff, broccoli. Spices. Spices are potent antioxidants. We're going to talk about oxidation in just a minute. My favorite one is turmeric. Of course, we mentioned that one already. But also some really good ones are things like clove, saffron, which is a little bit pricey, but all the others are basically pennies a serving. So make sure to get in a nice variety of spices, which also makes your food taste delicious, right? This should be fun. This should be enjoyable. It should not be a miserable experience. Berries. Oh my gosh, superstars, berries. Focus on a variety of rich colors, jewel tones, bright reds, purples, blues, all that kind of stuff. My favorite are blueberries. There's so much science on blueberries, which is a lot of fun. A handful of blueberries can improve brain health within a few hours. So we're not talking about weeks of use here. If you want to improve your brain function today, go ahead and make sure you're getting your berries. My second favorite are strawberries. Get those berries in. Beans. So when it comes to the healthiest places in the world, remember you've heard of the 5 blue zones? That number has expanded. There are more blue zones now, but the 5 originals, the most common indicator of good health, apart from good social connections, that was number 1. Number 2 was beans. Beans every day. So what we're aiming for is a cup to a cup and a half. And when I say beans, I mean all of the legumes and the lentils and all that kind of stuff. My favorite for brain health are lentils. Lentils are fantastic because they're quick cooking. They are better tolerated as people are adjusting to higher fiber foods. And so lentils are my favorite in terms of those specific situations. But eat the variety. We are always trying to get in variety, and I'm going to tell you why in just a little bit. The aromatics. So these are the things, the veggies that make our food taste good. The the garlic, onion, shallots, you know, all of those, all of that family. And if you want to be super angelic about it, eat some raw, because raw has, you know, some special properties. Cut them up, leave them 5 or 10 minutes, and then go ahead and eat them raw. If you want to make them cooked, just make sure to add a little bit of raw too. Seeds, again, you're going to hear me say this over and over again today. Make sure to get in a tablespoon or 2 of flax, chia, or hemp, or some combination. My favorite is flax. Flax has some other special properties that I love about it. So we're going to talk about some things to stay away from. Now, mostly I don't talk about foods to stay away from, because I'm more interested in what you are eating, because we can list what we don't eat all day long, but it's really important that we know what you actually are eating. That's the critical piece. But let's talk about some things that are going to cause harm so that we know to stay away from them. Things with saturated fat, high saturated fat, and any cholesterol. So cholesterol is only found in animal foods. It's not found in any plant foods. But if a plant food like coconut oil, for example, is high in saturated fat, it causes our bodies to make excess cholesterol, more cholesterol than we need. So really important to stay away from as much as humanly possible. You don't have to be perfect, just get those numbers down. The meats, the dairies, cheeses, you know, all that kind of stuff, and oils. Now, I know what you're thinking. Some of you are saying, but some oils are healthy, right? Some oils are healthier, but that doesn't mean that they're good food to consume. Why? Because they're a highly processed food. You know, some fats are really good for us. Some fats we actually need. But when you extract them from their source food, then what you're left with is almost none of the micronutrients and pure fat, which is extremely calorie dense, and oils tend to be high in omega-6. Remember, we're talking about that omega-3/6 ratio. So try to avoid those oils as much as possible, especially the tropical ones. So palm oil, which you'll find in a lot of processed foods, and coconut oil. Coconut oil is not good for you. I'm sorry, it's just not. All right, so let's talk a little bit about processed foods. You already know this, I'm not gonna get into it. You know, white flour, white sugar, it comes in a box or a bag. You know, you want to be really, really leery of any kind of highly processed food and anything that's deep fried. So again, that's another aspect of oil, but when you deep fry things, special unpleasant things happen. Now, if you refuse to avoid these things, just make sure that you know exactly what's in your food. Use this. Use your brain. Critically evaluate everything you put in your body. Increase all that good stuff. What about fish? What about fish? So remember that we are staying away from saturated fat and cholesterol. Sorry, it's taking its time to switch. There we go. Sorry about that. We're trying to stay away from saturated fat and cholesterol. Fish are animals, especially the crustaceans, you know, the bottom dwellers, the ones that clean up the bottom of the ocean. Those are very high in cholesterol. So we want to stay away from those, but any other kind of fish also is high in saturated fat and cholesterol. So why is eating fish even recommended at all? It's because it has lovely omega-3 fatty acids. But just like with all other nutrients that we can get from plants before they are recycled through animals, the same as with fish. So I've given you some sources for omega-3 fatty acids. And if you want to take a supplement, make sure that you're getting plenty of ALA, DHA, and EPA. You can also take an algae-based supplement. The other reason we want to stay away from fish is because of what we have done to our oceans. It's really sad. So fish, because they're like little sponges, little water filters out there, water goes through their gills and it's just absorbed into their tissues. So the little fish, little sponges, eaten by bigger fish, eaten by bigger fish. So the increase of toxins is exponential the larger the fish. So if you are going to consume fish, please avoid the crustaceans, you know, the bottom dwellers, and have just a little bit of the smaller fish. Still high in saturated fat and cholesterol. You know, the question I like to ask is, why do we tell pregnant women to stay away from it. It's because of the mercury, especially, but the PCBs and the dioxins and all that kind of stuff is very harmful to that developing baby's brain. So fish is not necessarily a health food. Actually, it's not a health food, period. But there are those omega-3 fatty acids, which we can get from the same place that the fish get it. So I just have one little slide about our oceans. You know, I don't talk about the environment a lot, but what we have done to our oceans is really horrific. And so what we're looking at here is the way that I sort of think about this in terms of equating it is, would you go to your friend's garbage halfway down and eat anything that was in there? No, you wouldn't. And that's sort of what I'm talking about when we're eating, you know, little creatures that live in the ocean. Our oceans are really a big old mess. And so that's just an added reason not to consume things that come out of our ocean. Okay, so this is a little slide I have coming up here. And I just wanted to point this out. People don't realize that you know, the most highly recommended fish, which is salmon, because it's a fatty fish, is high in fat. It's high in saturated fat and it's high in cholesterol. Have a look here. This steak has a bit more saturated fat, but the salmon has more cholesterol. So this is not, you know, low saturated fat, low cholesterol food. All animals contain cholesterol, and all foods that come from animals contain cholesterol as well. And we don't need any extra. Our body makes what it needs. I want to point out cheese, because cheese is our worst saturated fat offender. Look at those numbers. For the same amount, 100 grams, it's 4 times that of steak for saturated fat. It's astronomical. And so cheese, I know we love our cheese, don't we? But there are definitely ways to get the cheese experience without having to subject your body to that. So let's transition into oxidation. So oxidation is basically, if you think about an iron vehicle, which we have a picture of here, when the iron is exposed to oxygen over time, it oxidizes and it turns into rust. If we expose fruits and vegetables, their inside flesh, to the air, sometimes they oxidize as well. You can see the damage that's been done to the inside of this apple. So how do we protect our bodies from oxidation? With antioxidants. What are antioxidants? If I say antioxidants, what comes to mind? All of the beautiful rainbow colored fruits and vegetables. Those are the best antioxidants. And also those spices. Don't forget those wonderful spices. They're very high in antioxidants. We really just want to eat a variety of plant-based foods. This is where we're going to get all of the micronutrients we need for our bodies to heal and protect themselves. So switching gears just a little bit, this might seem a little out of left field, but let me just tell you, some folks out there are calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. And so we really, have come to learn that everything is connected again, right? That when we have blood sugar control issues, that can also affect our brains. Insulin resistance. Now, if you haven't heard this phrase before, basically, glucose is our cells and most importantly, our brain's favorite source of energy. Our brain uses glucose almost exclusively. So if you are doing a low carb diet or something like that, then you're not giving your brain what it needs. And our brain uses about 20% of our energy that we eat. So really important to choose wisely. Now, are all carbs good? Of course not. Is the donut the same thing as an apple? Definitely not. So we want good quality carbohydrates, carbohydrates that come in their natural form, that have all of their fiber and micronutrients attached, like blueberries here, again, my favorite. But any kind of whole food that grows from the ground, that has fiber, that is the kind of thing that will help to improve your insulin sensitivity. So we have glucose, so we eat whatever it is, blueberries, and it turns into glucose, and our bodies have a key that they use to open cells to let that glucose in to give our cells that energy that they need, and that is insulin. What insulin resistance is adding things like coconut oil or any other kinds of oil or saturated fat and all that kind of thing. What that does when we add those saturated fats, it's like putting gum in the lock and then trying to unlock it. And so that is insulin resistance, and it can be reversed. It can be improved by eating more of the good quality carbohydrates and avoiding animal products and high saturated fat cholesterol products. So that was just a brief mention. I highly recommend you do more research if you're interested in this subject. I could talk all day just on this subject. It's really fascinating. Eat more of those good quality carbohydrates and less of the animal products and anything else that contains saturated fat. Another brief mention that is tied in is gut health. This is another one of those emerging sciences I really love. I just love saying emerging sciences. All the emerging sciences, like what we're learning about Alzheimer's and gut health. Gut health is, we are learning, is very much tied to our brains. And so what is it that I'm talking about when it comes to gut health? We have trillions of cells that live within our bodies that are our little friends. They're our little buddies. I actually call them our little pets, because what we want to do is we want to feed the good ones. If you don't feed them, they die. And so you want to make sure that you're feeding those good little buddies that live with you in your body, because they are doing all sorts of beautiful things for you. They are helping to digest foods. They are helping with hormone regulation and brain health. So really, really important to keep track of what you're putting in your body to make sure that it is increasing good gut health and decreasing any of those unwanted harmful bacteria or other microbes. So what does that mean? Just briefly, everything that grows from the ground that's edible, eat a variety of it. That's a really, really good start. So make sure to feed those little buddies, the good ones. So here again, a little review, what to eat. All the fiber foods. Fiber is only found in foods that grow from the ground. It's not, it's commonly known that some people think that fiber is found in meat, and it's not. There's no meat, there's no fiber in any animal products whatsoever. It's only found in the things that we can eat that grow from the ground. So make sure variety and consistency. We need to consistently feed those good little buddies that are in there. So consistency and variety. Like I said, avoiding animal foods, anything that comes from an animal or that was an animal, those are harmful. Anything highly processed, again, for insulin resistance and gut health both. For our health, we want to stay away from those highly processed foods. Eat real food. It's delicious. It's beautiful. So good for you. It's going to love you back. Stay away from anything that's food-like substances. So there's some highly processed foods out there that I don't even consider remotely close to food. Things like Jell-O, what is that? And things like Coke. I mean, that's leaning more towards drugs than it is food. So stay away from that stuff that we know is harmful to our bodies. So again, I highly recommend that you be your own best advocate when it comes to this. Find trusted sources of information, but also do your own research. Be your own best advocate. Highly recommend that you look more into these things that I mentioned briefly. Blood sugar, insulin resistance, and diabetes as it relates to brain health, gut health, the gut biome, microbiome, microbiota. Those are all kind of keywords that you'll hear. All of those are really significantly tied to good brain health. Okay, let's review. You want to fuel your body really well. So get in all of those daily items. One of my favorite ways to remember that is Dr. Furman, Joel Furman, has his G-bombs, and that's the easiest way to remember. So G-bombs, greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. Get in those G-bombs every day. If you're a big fan of checklists, check out Dr. Michael Greger's Daily Dozen. There's a free app for your phone that you can use. He also has 21 tweaks for weight loss on there. So all very heavily science evidence-based. So to fuel good brain health, eat your greens every day, at least 2 to 3 servings. Eat a combination of cooked, eat a combination of cooked and raw, combine those. Eat a variety, lots of different kinds. Don't just stick with spinach. Spinach is fine, but also, get in some of the other ones. If you're not a big fan of kale, you don't have to eat kale, but think about Swiss chard. That one's nice and dark and rich in color and heavy duty. And it is also mild tasting. So that might be something you want to try. So try a variety of grains. A lot of the tops of vegetables can be eaten. The tops of your beets can be eaten, for example. So consider that as well. Consider herbs, consider sprouts, consider all the green vegetables. Get those greens in. Now, special tip, ready for this? If you're going to cook your greens, add a pinch of mustard powder, especially the cruciferous ones. So the cruciferous greens, remember that cabbage family, kale, arugula, cabbage, all of those. Add a little bit of mustard powder. If you're going to eat them raw, then chop them and leave them for 30 to 45 minutes. It creates sulforaphane, and that is powerfully helpful and protective in lots of different ways. So you don't need to know the words, the big words. You just need to know, if you're cooking, add mustard powder. If you're eating raw, chop and leave for about 40 minutes, and that will create that beneficial chemical. Eat a wide variety of colorful plants, because each different color has its own specific nutrients that are helping our bodies heal and protect ourselves. So make sure to get in that rainbow every day. The seeds, I know I've mentioned the seeds over and over again, but this is the one that is maybe unusual for some folks, since I really want to send this one home. Flax and chia must be ground. You have to grind them. So our bodies they'll just go whoop right through if you don't grind them up. So make sure to grind those. Hemp, you don't have to grind, but either any of these or a combination is fine. At least a tablespoon or two a day. If you're over the age of 65, I would recommend 2. Spices, get in a variety of spices. They have their own special properties, and herbs too. So, get in all of those. They're concentrated forms of, antioxidants and protective ingredients. Supplements. Okay, again, I want to reiterate, please don't take multivitamins. Take whatever it is that you need. Find out what you need, and then take it if you need to. Keep that list low. Keep that list short. The shorter, the better. We want to get our nutrients through food wherever possible. The only exception is B12, because of what we've done to our soil and our water. We really should be supplementing B12, but you can also have that one checked. If you have underlying conditions related to cardiovascular health, or you have a family history of Alzheimer's or other things, then you might want to consider taking an algae-based DHA EPA supplement. Talk to your doctor or nutritionist about the amount that's appropriate for you. So watch out for unnecessary supplements, especially those heavy metals, saturated fat and cholesterol. Check your labels and stay away from those things that contain saturated fat and cholesterol. Animal foods. Trans fats or partially hydrogenated fats. So there are some natural trans fats in animal products. So we want to stay away from trans fats entirely. One thing you really want to be careful of is trans fats or partially hydrogenated fats that are added to processed foods. Those are the worst. The maximum recommended amount is 0, because that's how bad they are. Please stay away from trans fats. And the ingredient list if it says anything about partially hydrogenated, just no. Put those back on the shelf. Do something else. Watch out for your metals, those heavy metals. Baking powder without aluminum, iron supplements. Stay away from iron supplements unless you need them. Unless your doctor says you have anemia or low iron, stay away from those iron supplements. And stay away from things that contain mercury, like those poor little fish. All right, look at me, right on 12:40. I couldn't be more proud. All right, so if you have questions, I'm going to invite Dr. Megan Mesher-Cox to come back. And do we have any questions?
Yes. So our first question, I have a few here that I want to ask you too, but our very first question, what if you consider having fish once a month? So she asked, I assume you mean sardines and anchovies for small fish. And how about larger fish once a month?
Okay, so the general recommendation for, kind of like a maximum that we say is, it would be a couple of ounces a couple of times a week. So if you had it once a month and it wasn't more than a few ounces, you would be fine. But just keep in mind that those things are going into your body. And so you want to make sure to shore up your body with the good stuff if you're ever going to have fish. So any kind of small fish. Sardines are a little bit of a problem because they tend to be packed in oil and salt. And so that's an issue. Anything that you can buy fresh that is small, that's what I would recommend. Good questions.
Yeah. And to add to, the blue zones, we've brought that up already, right, Jay?
Yeah.
And on average, the blue zones, there was only one of the 5 communities that was totally plant-based and vegetarian. The other ones actually did have meat, but on average, they had about 3 or 4 ounces about once every 10 days. So really not often.
I think that's a really important piece. One thing I didn't emphasize, which I typically do, is that you don't have to be 100% plant-based. As a matter of fact, the sort of ideal range is about 95%. So if you have other things that you want to include, just be mindful of, their negative effects and make sure to shore up your body with the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a lot of information maybe you could speak to, Jay, about, meat back when is very different, even 30, 40 years ago, meats or dairy, the way they were 30, 40 years ago and the way they are now, nutritionally, they're significantly different. Could you tell us more about that?
Oh my gosh. Well, let's just start with fish. Fish, this is huge because fish are, most of the fish that we buy in the store is farmed. And when, buyers buy fish, the sellers will actually bring them a paint chip array. What color do you want your salmon to be? Because we're going to dye it the right color because their diet is so contrary to their natural diet that they come out gray instead of that bright pink that they're supposed to. So it's really important to consider how your animals are raised if you're considering eating. Now, chicken is a big one too. If you look at chicken, in the 50s and chicken now, they look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They can barely stand up these things because they've been so, just over processed and bred to be way too big for their bodies. And so that chicken back then is not the same chicken as now. So not only are these chickens, significantly increased saturated fat and cholesterol, but they are also high sodium because what sellers will do is right before they slaughter the chicken so that they don't have to declare it in the ingredients, they'll inject the chicken with salt water. And that pumps up their weight so that they can get more money from them. So again, just like you said, the meat that we used to eat is nothing like the meat we eat now.
And Jay, can you tell us, we had another question about what are the benefits of organic fruits and vegetables over regular fruits and vegetables?
Okay, so the number one important thing to realize here is that in terms of nutrients, in terms of nutrition, the science says that conventional and organic are about the same. So what we're focusing on when we buy organic is we're trying to put fewer chemicals in our body, some of those fewer harmful chemicals, right? That's the main focus. Now, keep in mind that organic is not chemical free, right? They still use some chemicals. It's just a much shorter list. And they have a lot of requirements, a lot of hoops they have to jump through in order to call themselves certified organic. And so if you're trying to stay away from pesticides in your food, if you're trying to stay away from excess chemicals that they use for fertilizer, all that kind of thing, if you really want to be grossed out, go ahead and look up what they use in conventional farming for fertilizer. You will be horrified. You will never eat non-organic again. But I'm saying that non-organic apple is still full of micronutrients, still full of fantastic things. Wash that baby really, really well and go ahead and eat it if that's all that you can afford. So the nutrients are the same. It's the chemicals that are the problem. Mm-hmm. It's the things that they add that are the problem.
And most of the time, what we see in medicine, it's the lack of those great nutrients and vitamins. So the lack of fruits and vegetables in the diet, right? Less so than the concern about the organic versus non-organic.
Exactly.
Could you tell us a little bit more, Jay? 40% of dementia is preventable. That's huge, right? And we
Yes.
talked a lot today about the dietary piece, which is huge, especially here in the United States with our usual dietary patterns. Can you tell us a little bit about the other factors that greatly weigh into decreasing our risk for dementia?
Okay, yes, absolutely. So whenever we are adding things into our bodies that were not meant to be there, you know, when it comes to Alzheimer's specifically, again, this is an emerging science, so we're, you know, we are still learning and we're still learning. But what they're finding in the science is that we have these little tangles and these plaques, and when they test what is in these things, it is, you know, saturated fat, cholesterol, heavy metals, this kind of thing. So when we stay away from those things that we mentioned earlier here, you're much less likely to see that. Also, if you increase things like Dr. Greger, if you've not heard of Dr. Michael Greger, he has this website called nutritionfacts.org, an excellent resource if you're not a big fan of reading scientific studies. I know they can be a bit grueling. So he's a really good source. I quite enjoy what he does. It's a total labor of love for him. He doesn't get paid for it. Fantastic. Nutritionfacts.org. He just did a video about saffron and how it actually helps with the tangles. And again, this is emerging science, so it's not perfect. Thank you, Dr. Megan. And so that's in the chat. Anybody wants to look that up. So we want to eat more of the things that we just talked about and eat less of the things that we also talked about in terms of the saturated, basically anything that comes from an animal, as well as those heavy metals, which tend to come in supplements and highly processed foods. And so really watch out for stuff like that. But there's so many other things that you can do to protect your brain as well. Make sure to keep learning, make sure to exercise, make sure to get good sleep, be hydrated, stay hydrated, make sure to engage this brain as much as possible. Use it or lose it.
Mm-hmm. And de-stress is a really, really big piece too. So you can't avoid the stress, but when it comes, how, you know, do we have ways to de-stress so that we're not staying in that fight and flight response?
So I will say just a little bit something extra about stress as it relates to brain health. I'm so glad you mentioned it, because stress also impacts blood sugar. And so remember, all of these things are all tied together. And so what happens when you have a high stress moment, you know, remember back in the day, it was you're running away from the saber-toothed tiger, but now it's just us sitting at our desks going, fight or flight, when actually we're just sitting here. And so our bodies, and when it's chronic, when it's happening all the time, our bodies are just flooded with all of these things that, you know, our bodies are just trying to help us. They're just trying to help us survive. But this is not a survival issue. This is an issue of, I have too many things going on in my life. I have, you know, a boss breathing down my neck, or I have teenage children, or whatever it is. Just make sure to protect yourself, because it impacts your health in many, many different ways, including inflammation, and you know, increase in cortisol levels that increases excess weight. I mean, there's so many things that impacts. So really be mindful of your stress level. That's a good one. Thank you, Dr. Megan.
The last one I had here, you know, I get asked a lot in the office about how much for turmeric. So could you tell us a little?
So turmeric is a food. So it is relatively safe. But something really, really important to note is that more is not always necessarily better, right? And everything has a toxicity level. Water has a toxicity level. If you drink too much water, you can actually, it can actually be fatal. So be really mindful. If you measure your water intake on a daily basis in gallons, be mindful that you're not consuming too much. Okay, so that's my general recommendation on that. When it comes to turmeric though, it's generally pretty safe, but you only need a little bit. It's a 1/4 teaspoon a day. And so basically, if you're adding it to your food, a 1/4 teaspoon, don't forget to add that pepper. The pepper is key for potency. Add that little pinch of pepper, black pepper, plain black pepper is fine. If you're taking a capsule or a tablet, just make sure that there's nothing in it but turmeric and a little bit of pepper, hopefully. And take that once, maybe twice a day. And don't go overboard. You don't need to go overboard. But I will tell you that every person that I have come across that I have recommended turmeric to, regardless of whether they change anything about the rest of their diet or not, it has helped. So if you want something that is relatively benign and only has good side effects, then make sure to get your turmeric in. Even if you don't have pain, we all have inflammation. We all have things going on in our bodies. Our bodies are stressed. We want to heal that inflammation. Take your turmeric every day, quarter teaspoon. That's all you need, a little bit of black pepper.
Great. Those are the questions that I had. We want to be very respectful of your time. So Jay and I specifically said we want to make sure to not pass 1 o'clock. We have about 10 minutes left here. I just want to make one comment, please, because you all might be hearing about the new medication for Alzheimer's in the news. It's the monoclonal antibody for Alzheimer's. So goods and bads, there have been some reports showing that it might help. It's a little gray if that's the case. And actually, initially they came back saying that it does not help. And then the company that makes it went back, had a big board meeting, did some more information, more data crunching, and came back and said, no, actually it is helping. Let's make sure to get it approved. So most of us in the scientific community are, looking at it with the side eye because it's just a little odd. Things were not looking very promising, and then something happened, and all of a sudden now they say, no, let's push it forwards. Though that monoclonal antibody is made to attach to those tau proteins. So to attach to pretty much the scars that are formed there in the brain from the damage that's been done. And they're supposed to remove or break down those tau proteins. It's very sketchy if that will work or not. Really, the whole point, and across the board, it's really, most researchers have come to the conclusion that prevention is the cure. That's the only way. So, and here in Southern California, we have Cedars, we have Loma Linda, we have UCLA. All three are huge centers that are leading this fight. And all of them have come to the conclusion that really we need to be focused on prevention. So everything that Jay is saying, really the power, it's so strong. Thus, the reason why we feel so strong to put this out here is as often as we can. So
yes.
Just to put it out there. Mm-hmm.
And on that note, don't forget that this is part of disease prevention and reversal. And every month, the first Wednesday of the month from noon to 1, we're going to be doing a different talk. So if you're on this call, likely you're signed up on prevdoc.com. But if you're not, if you got this link from somebody else, go ahead and make sure to sign up so that you see all of the free events we have coming up. Last month, Dr. Megan did a talk on bone and joint health, which was absolutely fantastic. And so we're going to alternate, maybe even bring in some other guest speakers. We'll see how that goes, but we are going to do our best to keep you up to date with all the best information. The first Wednesday of the month from noon to 1, prevdoc.com.
Okay, well, so not seeing any other questions here, we'll sign off a few minutes early. Hope you all have a wonderful week, and please, we're here to help. Any questions you have, just let us know.
Please do. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.